I've had multiple fire chiefs come into a meeting very fearful of the technology and leave with a sentiment that transmission-connected battery energy storage systems are far from the most dangerous thing that are built within their service territory. They often leave comfortable knowing that these transmission-connected battery storage systems do not pose as a danger to public health and safety.
Last episode, we got a high-level overview of what battery storage is and why it's needed. Claudia mentioned that New York is looking to deploy 6,000 megawatts of battery storage capacity by 2030, and we only have a couple hundred megawatts deployed so far, so a lot of work to do. But while this may be a new concept for many people, I wanted to talk today about some of that existing capacity by talking to a developer who has successfully deployed projects in New York. This is Plugging In. I'm Barry Wygel. Welcome to Plugging In, powering our way to a brighter and healthier New York. I'm your host, Barry Wygel. Each episode on this podcast, we will discuss a different topic related to clean energy, explaining complex topics in a way you can understand. Become part of the community as we help to make a brighter and healthier New York.
As the sun crests on the horizon, a new day dawns in our state. A new hope for tomorrow is rising, a clean future we create. Tomorrow we breathe easier, tomorrow the skies are clear. Today we are plugging in, the future of New York is here.
There is a misconception out there that the battery storage projects that are being proposed now across New York are the first of their kind, but that isn't really true. I actually live a mile and a half from a BESS facility known as Key Capture 1. To tell us a little bit more about this and other operating storage projects in New York is Phil Denara, a developer from Key Capture Energy. Phil, thanks for joining us today on the podcast.
Hi, Barry. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So can you give me a little recap of what projects you have operating in New York?
We've got 3 large-scale operating projects online today, which, as you mentioned, I think few members of the public actually realize when battery storage permit applications are being submitted at the town level. So we've got our KC New York 1 facility, which is in Stillwater, New York, right near you, Barry. And that was, at the time, it's a 20 megawatt facility, and at the time was the largest operational facility in the state, and was supported through that initial storage roadmap and NYSERDA Market Bridge Incentive Program. After KC New York 1, we've also got our KC New York 3 facility, which was brought online in 2020 in response to one of those PSC mandated utility procurements, which was released by Orange and Rockland. So that project's in Pomona. And then finally, we've got our KC New York 6 facility, which is in Blaisdell, New York, just south of Buffalo, which was also supported via that Market Bridge Incentive Program by NYSERDA, and is currently the largest operational facility in the state at 20 megawatts, 40 megawatt hours. Just recently, the Public Service Commission actually approved an order which formalized a doubling of the state's storage target from 3 gigawatts to 6 gigawatts by 2030. And DPS staff and NYSERDA just recently filed that implementation plan, which we're all really excited about, and will ensure that the many other projects under development in the state can be deployed with that support of this updated roadmap. There's no denying that New York is set to see a tremendous build out of both land-based and offshore renewable energy, and storage is really needed now. We need steel in the ground now to ensure that our grid is ready for those energy systems of tomorrow.
Absolutely. We all have a lot of work to do, both us as advocates and explaining this technology, and then you to actually go out and build it. And it's hard to kind of say how many number of projects we'll need because it depends on the capacity of the projects and whatnot. But you're right, we need a lot of them. So this is still a new concept for many, many, many people. We actually did some polling towards the end of last year that showed the amount of people that have never heard of battery storage before. So we need to introduce this concept. So when people think of lithium-ion batteries, they're probably not thinking of their cell phones or laptops or AirPods, even though that's probably the place they interact with them the most. You hear on the news about e-bike fires and those types of things. First of all, are these the same technology that are powering e-bikes as powering the battery storage facilities that you're building?
It's actually quite a different technology. I think it's really important for the public to understand that these utility scale transmission connected battery energy storage systems undergo rigorous international and national testing and are very different from the batteries that you would typically see in the micro mobility devices like e-bikes that we're seeing in New York City, oftentimes bought with either batteries or chargers on a gray market, and other consumer electronics.
Let's talk a little bit about those safety measures that you put into place at your facilities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, safety is a top priority for Key Capture Energy. You know, we still have a weekly all-team call where the first thing we're doing every single time is reviewing our safety protocols and identifying good catches that happened out in the field for our operational projects. So it really is core to our day-to-day planning and business objectives. There are a multitude of safeguards and certifying bodies, both at the international, national, and state level, which have applicable codes and standards. You know, we really do pride ourselves on being a member of the community where our projects are located. We have a comprehensive approach to safety that includes educational series with civic associations and local town leadership, proactive meetings with fire marshals, and training with local fire departments, which happens during the development phase, during the construction phase, and periodically during the operational phase as well. I think it's also really important for the public to know that these systems are 24/7, 365 remotely operated, and there's a number of safety thresholds which, when triggered, allow us to shut off the system and de-energize any components of the system that have an issue prior to an event actually transpiring.
Yeah, you mentioned the interacting with the local fire departments, which obviously is very, very, very important for projects such as this. And probably when you approach a fire department, they're not used to dealing with this type of facility. They don't have one in their district yet. So how do you work to kind of educate a fire department, a fire chief, volunteer fire departments in, upstate New York on what this technology is and how they should respond if something goes wrong?
As mentioned, we've been developing projects for over 6 years in New York, and oftentimes when we're approaching a town, one of the first questions that they have, like irrespective of fire and safety, is like, how do we actually interpret this use? Like, is it a public utility? Do we need to adopt a code amendment? And so there's a ton of education that goes into the overall message, which is like, this is new for us, and we really appreciate you all coming in as a developer and making sure that we have a clear understanding of the use. With respect to fire and safety specifically, I've hosted many of these meetings and have definitely faced skepticism. But that said, I've had multiple fire chiefs come into a meeting very fearful of the technology and leave with a sentiment that transmission-connected battery energy storage systems are far from the most dangerous thing that are built within their service territory. Compared to incumbent systems, which we rely on day to day, including propane, for example, and the micro-mobility devices, which you mentioned, which are popping up as an issue throughout New York City, they often leave comfortable knowing that these transmission-connected battery storage systems do not pose as a danger to public health and safety. And quite honestly, in a worst-case scenario, they're comparable to that of a typical structural fire.
When we first started advocating about battery energy storage, we thought we'd have to convince people of the why we need these. And I think there's obviously work to be done there. But then the safety aspect is certainly the number one question that you mentioned. But now that you've actually seen these in action in New York, have you been able to have some case studies of why we need these systems or how they're helping during extreme weather events or anything like that?
There's the host of examples that demonstrate the value that energy storage can provide to the grid and ratepayers. One of our key successes is the New York 3 project, which I mentioned in the Hudson Valley. This is what was considered a non-wires alternative, which was a pretty innovative project at the time, where essentially the local transmission owner had identified thermal overloads on their system because of growing electricity demand, and determined that it was actually cost effective to deploy a storage project at the substation rather than building costly infrastructure that would have been rate-based to the ratepayers. I think that's a great example of the value that storage can provide in the system, both in terms of ensuring resilience, but also saving ratepayers money. And then, Barry, outside of New York, Key Capture has several operating projects in Texas. We're seeing tremendous load growth, especially in the hot summer months. You're starting to see storage deployed at scale, showing up when it's most needed during those peak demand periods, and allowing ERCOT and transmission owners avoid load shedding events, which are essentially blackout events. So storage can be there during those peak windows and discharge power onto the grid when it's needed most. And then finally, Barry, I just really want to highlight that there have been a number of reports published in New York which do demonstrate that it's feasible and cost effective to deploy storage today that'll displace high polluting peaker plants, especially benefiting communities that have largely borne the burden of living near those power plants historically.
All good points. I'm glad you mentioned Texas because that is the number one state in the country for deployed battery storage right now. And if you Google battery storage in Texas, you'll see those stories that you've talked about of specific times where there's been extreme weather and people have not had to turn off their air conditioning in the summer and hopefully save lives because of it. So yeah, storage certainly making a difference, and they're ahead of us. So now we have to kind of get there as well. So a lot of people are not exposed to this, as we've been saying, but they will be because of the number of projects we need to build. What should people ask? What should people be thinking about if they hear a battery storage project is coming to their town?
Listen, there's no denying that we are moving towards a world of continued electrification. From the electric vehicles and heat pumps that are being deployed throughout our communities to smart homes and devices and artificial intelligence, everything is moving away from fossil reliance and something that ultimately combusts and towards something that is electrified and ultimately requires an inverter. So what should the public know? Ultimately that battery energy storage systems are crucial and they are safe. They're going to benefit ratepayers, and they're going to keep the lights on and ensure that energy markets are operating efficiently. As energy systems change and more renewables come online in the state, it's really important that we have energy storage deployed today to ensure that we have an efficient energy supply chain. And then finally, just to finish, I think it's important for folks to understand that batteries are going to play a critical role for not only their communities meeting carbon reduction goals, but from a statewide perspective, to bring it back to the Community Leadership and Community Protection Act that we talked about at the beginning, helping the state meet its 2030 goals that have been set out into law. And then finally, just big picture, again, this is all climate action to support good old Mother Earth and ensure that we're working towards a world that we can continue to inhabit and that our kids and grandkids can continue to inhabit.
Excellent. Phil, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Barry. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Plugging In. I hope you learned something, and I hope you share this knowledge with someone else. It would be incredibly helpful if you leave us a 5-star review wherever you found this podcast. If there's a topic you would like us to cover in the future, or have a question about clean energy, send us an email at podcast@aceny.org. You can follow us on social media using the links in the show notes, or consider joining our Clean Energy Supporters mailing list at aceny.org/support. Your support is crucial to creating a brighter and healthier New York. I'll see you next time.
As the sun crests on the horizon, a new day dawns in our state. A new hope for tomorrow is rising, a clean future we create. Tomorrow we breathe easier. Tomorrow the skies are clear. Today we are plugging in.